Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Sharpen Podcast, brought to you by Acumen, a growth community for business owners and CEOs looking to grow and get to the next level. I'm your host, Dan Cooper. My guest today is Curt Sampson. He's the head of growth for Monarch Inventory Services and is now a growth catalyst, which is our fancy word for a team leader and facilitator starting a new key executive and C-suite team in Kansas City. Today, we're going to talk about the unique relationship between the CEO and the COO. Sometimes in the trendy worlds, they call that the integrator for you EOSers out there. There's different kinds and styles and expectations between these two roles, and also a lot of tension. So let's find out why. Curt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Dan. I'm grateful for you letting me jump on and chat a little bit with you today. So thank you very much.
Bet. So before we deep dive, give us the high level of a career. How'd you get here?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I've been blessed, and I started out in big business. Again, coming out of school, I went to work for big behemoths like a Hallmark Cards and a Newell Rubbermaid and Avery Dennison. But I was fortunate that they always put me in an incubator. So I went to a different building to start something new, like Shoebox Greetings, and they always said, do it better, smarter, faster. Whether it was Hallmark, where they said the mothership was broken, or whether it was Newell, where they said, we just bought a couple $100 million family-owned business and it's not as profitable as it should be. Get it to 15% operating income and go. So I've always had this mindset that things can be done, that change was normal and things can be improved. And I think sometimes in big bureaucratic businesses, that's not the norm. So when those took me from Kansas City to Georgia to California with my wife and 3 kids, we knew eventually we wanted to get back here to the Midwest where the culture was a little bit different and we could take care of my in-laws as they're going through the final chapter of their life. And I came back, oddly enough, into small business as a consultant. Enron had blown up Arthur Andersen, or Arthur blew up Enron, whichever side of the table you're sitting on.
Right.
And I became a consultant. The only thing was I didn't plug in an ERP or do an audit or do taxes. I was an operator. I was the dude in the business that made stuff happen that drove the results in those big businesses. And I was a consultant. And wouldn't you know it, because I didn't do all those standard consulting things, I went to work for a client that recognized that. So I started a business with him. We grew a business from nothing to over $22 million. So all those incubators or change or fix it, grow it, think from scratch mentality that I learned in big business, I got to apply in a small business. And then I did that for 10 years and then went on to do that with other small businesses. That, again, continued to move me throughout the country, whether it be Denver or back to Kansas City, and help other small businesses. And I have since been working, when I say small businesses, again, it was anywhere from those something $5 million to grow something up to 50 or 100 and then back and forth. And I finally landed on figuring out it's just most important to grow both people and what's up in between the ears and the process and help others. And so that's where I've kind of landed. And again, I've been very, very fortunate to have taken that path and wouldn't trade it for anything.
Okay. So that's I always love careers because they're wild. And wherever we thought they started, they didn't. They always go somewhere unique. You've said the word several times, operator. So COO is, I think, one of the long misunderstood roles because it depends on who the CEO is, what skills, and yet at the same time, there's some stuff that just has to happen within side of business. So when we think about second in command or operator or integrator, all the trendy words, how do you define this role?
Well, it's kind of interesting because there's typically someone that's the boss sitting in the number 1 seat, and then there's someone sitting in the number 2 seat. Of the 9 different organizations or small businesses that I've been involved with, rarely have they've never been the same. And it depends. And after seeing a continuum of people fill that CEO seat, and one of them being me, and others in the COO seat being me as well, and the continuum of success from adjunct failure to wildly growing, I started asking, almost the Einstein thing. Don't do the same thing over and over and expect different results. You start asking yourself why, or what's different and why, and I can't understand. And I came up with a concept, I kind of an operating model or a way I think the way a business runs. And let me run through that first of all, and then I'll talk about the roles. Think of the old school clock dial. That's what the funny colored hair does to you. At the top, at 12 o'clock is seek first to understand. Rotate to 3 o'clock, and then you need to align. Now, somewhere in there, in that 1 or 2 o'clock realm, there needs to be a directionally correct strategy for the business. Again, don't spend too much time on that strategy because down here at 6 o'clock, you need to execute. And then over here at 9 o'clock, you measure it. And then once you measure results or what you're doing, it kind of have a better understanding. And then it's like a flywheel. Once when I was in a sales performance business, we used to keep the center of the clock dial was the client because everything revolves around the client. I've since expanded that to believe that there's probably three constituents or stakeholders in the middle, and it's kind of like a teeter-totter. You have clients, employees, but in the middle is the fulcrum, and that's typically the owner. So there have been times when I've worked for a PE-owned firm, and that's the owner, and they call a lot of shots. You have someone in the head seat they call a CEO, but they got the board. And then you have a COO, and they report to the CEO and have a lot of the execution. So there's a lot of different roles going on there. Typically, there's someone that's the visionary, someone that sets the strategy or has an idea and can see beyond.
Right.
When I came out of consulting, the client I went to work for was a dude who bought a ranch in Wyoming who didn't like paying taxes. So he bought that ranch, except for on this ranch, he goes, "Hey, Curt, man, I got 100 head of this critter they call a bison." He said, "Can I turn that into a business?" And this was 18 years ago. It was on the forefront of the healthier, better for you food craze.
Sure.
And his question was, how do I grow the industry? Can I grow the industry? And mind you, this dude was a multi-billionaire and cost wasn't going to be an objective. But he was the founder of a big online equity trading platform. So he saw the future that others couldn't. He saw the healthier, better for you food. But again, to give you an idea of scale and scope, the bison industry might harvest 100,000 animals this year. The beef industry will do 3 times that just today. So he said, can it scale? But we were just solving problems. The short answer was he had the vision, he had no clue on how to execute. And I think innovation comes from other industries. So I could take innovation concepts from other industries, whether it be consumer goods or software services or online services or sales concepts and apply them to that business to help it grow. So he was the visionary. He didn't have a clue on how to execute.
Okay. So you painted the flywheel. And I think it's interesting. Most people would say in the center is always the client. You also put the owner or the CEO or the board, whoever that might be, because if they're not on board with what you're doing, it doesn't matter how you execute. So apply the beginning of this story to that flywheel and what you learn.
So let's go down let's go down this bison story. This was an entrepreneur. This is a guy that grew a business from nothing to a how many is that? 8-figure exit. No, billions. That's 10. That's more than that. That's 11 figure. I mean, the dude sold it for multiple billions of dollars, right?
Yeah.
From nothing. right? So self-made billionaire. And I assumed, and he bootstrapped it. So I assumed he wanted to bootstrap. And we talked about this, and every year we set a budget and how to increase sales. He gave me incentives to increase the sales. So we went down that path. I think in year three, I had an opportunity. We had created a healthier, better for you hot dog. Um, we had the opportunity to sell that in a real niche market, and it's and that niche market was Wrigley Field. And if we sold every hot dog at Wrigley Field, we might make $350,000 in gross margin a year. I came to learn that to be the official hot dog of the Chicago Cubs cost ballpark francs millions of dollars. So it
Yes.
didn't
Yes.
really
I would
matter
imagine.
how many hot dogs I sold at Wrigley Field. I couldn't overcome that obstacle.
Yeah.
But what it did do is it scared suppliers in the regular hot dog market. And I created an exit that could make our company tens of millions of dollars. We could sell just the hot dog, just the formula for tens of millions of dollars. And if we did that, it would fund the growth. Um, but I came to learn that that wasn't the objective of the owner. Now, I didn't know that.
Oh,
I went down the path of doing that. I didn't know that. Again, part of what I came to learn was the owner wanted to teach his grandchildren the concept of capitalism, how to run a
mm,
business, how to try to be entrepreneurs. I didn't understand that until year 7 or 8 as they started coming into family meetings. So I always assumed the objective was to grow the business and make money along the way and doing that in a bootstrap fashion. So I thought a $20 million exit would be pretty cool because it could fund a lot of the other things we're doing. No, that wasn't the objective. Probably year 8 or 9, I came to learn that it was only a hobby. So going from seek to understand to align means that you have to be really crisp and concise at defining your strategy. Because if the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, everybody will go down a path assuming that they know what to do based on their experience and what they think is best versus being very careful. So I've even learned as an operator, as that integrator or as that COO, that you absolutely, and this is really kind of strange, this is more the role of the visionary or the CEOs to make sure you get a really good and accurate vision and articulate what that means. If you don't have that, it's very, very difficult to be aligned.
so in my experience, I find that the vision, once set, has creep, vision creep, or shiny object syndrome, whatever you want to call it. And so that this key role actually helps maintain the original vision and then allows it to creep in a way that is healthy or attainable. What's your take on the creeps?
It depends on what stage of the business or business life cycle you're in. I think I'm a big fan of putting that um, values, which are different, core values, which are different than your why, your what, and your how, whatever words you want to do those. I like to use purpose, vision, mission. I think EOS says it's uses this thing called a VTO. I like to put all that on one single page. I call it a strategy on a page. I learned that along the way. And then once you have your values and your why, your what, and your how, um, depending upon the books you read, you can call them quarterly rocks or I think John Doerr has a book called Measure What Matters. I love that book where he calls them objectives and key results. You put those objectives out there and you have only 3 or 4 of them. That's what's down at 6 o'clock is to execute. So pick 3 or 4 things, focus on them, and execute them. Um, and that's typically a quarterly exercise. And again, I think that's the accountability of the operator or the second in charge is to make sure you stick with that. You execute and then you measure against those. I think that's really important. and then on an annual basis, and that helps you be proactive and do what you believe, what I think Covey would say would be the top right quadrant, which is important and urgent, right? And that's what those rocks or OKRs are all about. And if you do that proactively rather than react to the shiny objects, which that's the syndrome of a lot of visionaries or leaders or CEOs. They can get excited about something. Usually you put guardrails in place, but those are things that you put on the issue list and you bring back and consider on a quarterly basis and so forth.
So
On an annual basis, excuse me.
Sure. If you're a CEO, you're worried about alignment below you. Like, do they understand? And have I been clear enough? And does it make sense? If you're a COO, you're looking up and you're like, do I understand? Is it clear? It feels like execution is actually the easy part, right? It feels hard because it has the most problems, but the alignment, we rush by. How do you know when you're aligned so that the execution is going to head in the right direction?
I think you can take the pulse of your team. So in order to be aligned, I think the most critical thing you can do to be aligned is communicate. That's with town halls, monthly meetings where you talk and let people know that the vision hasn't changed, that here's what, make sure everybody understands what your true values are, not just aspirational ones. You reinforce them. And then you talk about the objectives or the rocks for the quarter. You can do that in town halls or monthly meetings where you talk to. And part of what John Doerr says in Measure What Matters is everybody's focus should be aligned with an objective, or Covey would call the rock. Everybody, what they're working on this quarter to move the needle to would improve what I would call KPIs, key performance indicators, pervasive measures over time that measure how the business is doing this month or next year. Those rocks, those objectives, everybody should be working on something that's going to jump those up. That's not just day to day, more than just the 1% better this month or this week or today. Those rocks, everybody ought to be tied to improving those and laser focused in on those. And if you ask your team, if you're not working on something that affects that objective or that rock, please let us know. And then you tell people how we're doing against that, right? And it's communication, it's discussion, it's alignment.
So it's interesting. You kind of took it from the top on down. So that's how it cascades. What about between the two at the top? What's your experience of how you keep that healthy and aligned, given what you experienced, where you learned after a long time that you weren't?
This boils down to the values, or one of the things I've found in understanding board members, owners, or CEOs as an operator. You have to really understand who the person is and maybe what their personal purpose is and what their values personally look like. It's easy to say something, but we've always heard the axiom, actions speak louder than words. So,
how do you figure that out?
You have to be transparent and ask that question. You have to have the courage to do that. In my mind, what I've learned again with this funny colored hair and a bunch of experiences, you have to be willing to ask the tough questions and hear the tough answer and figure out whether you want to be employed or whether you really want to work with someone. And there should be tension, a healthy tension between those two in the CEO and the COO or visionary and integrators. You should have conflict, but be able to, and it should be a healthy conflict, because you have to go out and agree on the strategy, then execute lockstep as one, because you are the leaders of the company, both from a vision and an execution perspective. And if you both agree on everything, something's wrong. Then the tension isn't healthy and you're not working to make the business better. Both of you ought to one of my personal values is you have to have an element of humility because you can't be right and you can't care who gets the credit because you will have different ideas. And if you care more about the business than you do each other and making others better, which is one of my personal values, then that'll work.
Okay. So I'm a CEO and I'm thinking about this number two. Maybe I'm just growing big enough where I need one person to help me execute one thing. How do I know I'm there? And then what am I looking for in this operator?
Yeah. Um, you if you can't, and this is an interesting, to me, and I think EOS does a good job of this. There's an owner seat, there's a visionary seat, there's an integrator or operator seat, and then there's revenue creation, revenue generate sales and marketing, there's delivery or operations, and then there's administration. You go through that accountability or org chart and say, what roles am I filling and can I do it all? You have to certainly say, what are my competencies? You have to say, be honest with yourself and say, if I look at these different roles, what are competencies needed? And where do I best fit? Where can I leverage, if I so desire growth, where can I put my skill set to use in the best fashion? And where do I need help? Typically in a small business, you might sit in one or more of those seats. And I think you have to figure out where those seats are. And then you have to figure out if you can afford that operator or that number two person. Um, and there's different ways to afford it. I think of compensation as having three different elements. There's a base salary or a draw, if you will. There's a short-term incentive, then there's a long-term incentive. And find out someone who wants to be in the game with you so that it can become a win-win proposition. If the business grows, then you get a little something, something out of the deal. I think to have skin in the game helps that concept of alignment.
Mm, mm. It's good. Okay, so you told $1 billion story, which is fun, large and startup. Um, we serve this mid market, this $5 to $50 million. How do you think some of those concepts traverse down into? So I think like how you talked about compensating is one of those good ones. How else might we think about this OO operator role?
Oh yeah. Well, that was with a client that had grown a business to be $1 billion. Our little bison business only ended up to be $22 million. Um, I'm of the opinion, well, in some of the concepts, let me say, I think it's good to have a diverse set of experiences. There are different opinions out there on whether you want a unicorn, whether you want someone that's so narrowly focused in a very specific, so there's two camps, very narrowly in an industry or a service realm, or someone that's got a breadth of experience and knows how to be an operator. I'm a fan of breadth of experience. I think leading people, understanding how to put one of those strategies together, how to conduct a monthly meeting, how to conduct a weekly meeting. I think, and then I also believe along the way, I've led new product development, for instance, and I think it's good to be able to have and understand where there's opportunities in the market. And I don't like creating just for the sake of creating, especially if you're a small business. I like the concept, for instance, of going out and finding a strategic client, understand their business and their need, and solving a problem for them. So if you can create a new product or service for a client, so you're not just creating on what you think is great, but find what I'll call a sponsor client. I did that once as a COO for a baking business. Um, it was a fascinating story. Our VP of sales got thrown out of a client in Bentonville, Arkansas, because he was delivering a sample. And for the second time, someone in the dock wouldn't receive it. And for the second time, he started dropping a bunch of F-bombs. So the CEO got a call from someone in Bentonville and said, we never want to see this guy again. He's done. Goodbye. And the CEO didn't know what to do. He didn't have a relationship, didn't anything. So he said, Curt, what are we going to do? I said, let's go down and talk to them. Let's find out, what they're thinking, what they're doing. And they took the meeting. and we went with what's at 12 o'clock. We sought to understand. They were developing, again, we're in the baking business. They were trying to get out of the commodity realm and develop their new version of what they called marketplace. In the baking world, rather than do a simple tray of $1.99 gut bomb cinnamon rolls, which we sold millions of dollars of every year to them, they said, well, we sell a $1.99 tray that weighs 2 pounds of what we call a cinnamon roll, but you guys are in the flour, sugar, lard business. I see these people like at Starbucks and Panera, they sell 3 ounces of something for twice what we sold our $1.99 for. How can we add value? So we talked about their market, about their client. We roll, and by the way, those cinnamon rolls probably had a gross margin of 4%. Now, they kept a lot of people employed, a lot of trucks rolling, used a lot of equipment, absorbed a lot of overhead. But we ended up developing 6 new SKUs with an average gross margin of 47% that met our objective and our objective and their objective. So I think that was a way of being aligned with our client. So you take that concept of being aligned and you go all the way down by seeking first to understand.
Hmm. All right. So, what are our big takeaways today? One, if do you need one? At some point, you will need an operator. If you don't want to have one inside, there's some good nuggets here for you to start thinking about. Two, if you do, how aligned are you, both up and down? And is there a healthy tension? Right? Is there needs to be a little bit of tension on both sides to get the best out of it. And then three, what's your operating system? And are you both all in on what that operating system is, no matter what acronyms you use or how
Yeah.
you go? Once again, this seems to be a recurring theme here is like, hey, listen, do you guys use the same words to do the things to move the stuff forward? Um, so good stuff. All right, bonus question, Mr. Sampson. How are you being sharpened, challenged, and inspired right now?
I always go back to 12 o'clock. So I seek to understand. So I keep understanding, which means I'm a constant learner. There's always something new to learn. Um, a recent podcast I found that helps me in both business and faith is I think called the 3 Minute Reset. It's from I'm trying to think Patrick Lencioni and another dude. I'm trying to think of who the I can't at the top of my head I can't think of who the other guy is, but it's called the 3 Minute Reset, and it's a nice daily exactly that reset from both a business and faith perspective that's helped me.
Very nice. We'll throw a link to that in the show notes. I've driven by that from time to time. All right, where can our listeners find out more about you, man?
Couple places I think in the About Us or in the Growth Catalyst section at Acumen Impact. I think it'd be wonderful. And then you can always hit me up on LinkedIn, Curt with a C, Urtsamson. Love to talk.
Awesome. As we said in the beginning, Curt is launching a new team for key executives and operators here in the Kansas City market. If you are interested in becoming a member of that or any Acumen team, you can go to acumenimpact.com, click on the apply button, or if you'd like to learn more, we have a ton of great content under the resources tab. Curt, thank you very much, man. And go be excellent, everybody.
Thank you, Dan.